So I know I've talked a lot about how it's difficult, but what are some strategies we can use to sort of counteract some of these difficulties? Hello, my name is Nikhil. I'm a med school applicant this cycle. I create content on social media about the pre-med process, and today I want to talk a little bit about the MCAT and specifically going into the test with the right mindset and confidence. I took the test this January, and one of the things that I felt wasn't discussed enough was really just the idea of developing the amount of confidence and the correct strategies necessary to be able to kill it on test day. I was able to score in the 95th percentile, and I used a couple strategies myself that I feel like could be helpful to you. So I want to go over that. So the MCAT is a test that is not one-dimensional. It presents many different challenges that a student must be prepared for. First of all, content review. The test assesses your understanding of a variety of different concepts. And what that does is it challenges your preparation ability. You have to understand the Krebs cycle and amino acids and biochemistry, all while learning about psychology and sociology and being able to apply that to real life situations. Or let's not even get into cars, right? So understanding content is a challenge. But I would argue even more important than that is knowing how to take the exam and understanding how to read the passages correctly and understand how they ask different types of questions and process of elimination and becoming a master of taking the test. When you combine those two things, the MCAT's not only testing your scientific ability, but it's also testing your ability to comprehend, and together that becomes a challenge. But let's say you're proficient at the understanding and content and you also know how to take this test. There's another variable that is as important in my opinion, and that's having the confidence and mindset necessary to apply your abilities on test day. I know a lot of people who did a lot of great preparation and got great scores on practice exams, but they didn't mentally prepare for the nervousness that is associated with taking the exam and the stakes of the exam. And on test day, it became a lot more difficult to execute what they were doing during practice. So that's what I want to discuss today. I want to talk about the fact that the MCAT is a big and important test. And I want to share that feeling that way is not bad. It just means you care. I want to go over the fact that a lot of people struggle with anxiety going into exams, specifically the MCAT. I want to discuss some of the strategies I use to counteract that. And then lastly, I want to go over a little bit about how the pre-med consultants could potentially help you if you're looking for help in this area. Literature suggests that 40 to 60% of students are negatively affected by test anxiety, but that's under normal conditions. I feel like the MCAT even goes beyond that for a few reasons. First of all, and I know this is obvious, is that the test is difficult. When something is difficult and we're nervous about it, it can creep into our mind and pervade focus a little bit more than we would want. Second, the exam is very unforgiving. What I mean by that is each section, you're given a specific amount of time that you get to complete the questions. And if you spend too much time on one passage because you don't understand it or you're nervous or you get distracted, not only does it impact your performance on that passage, it also affects how hard the rest of the test is going to be, and specifically that section. Because if you spend an extra 5 to 10 minutes on a question because you can't figure it out and you kind of get lost in the sauce, now you have 5 to 10 minutes less to complete the rest of the question. So it's an exponential process. And this is something I experience a lot during practice tests, and I recognize as being a weakness when I was taking the exam. And lastly is that we care. I'm somebody who, for a really long time, I wanted to be a physician. And when I learned about the MCAT, I knew it was a hurdle I would have to jump. And I know a lot of other people are in that position. So when we care about things, oftentimes we put a little bit more pressure on ourselves to do well and be successful. And I think that's definitely true with the MCAT. So I know I've talked a lot about how it's difficult, but what are some strategies we can use to sort of counteract some of these difficulties so that on test day we feel prepared and confident? First of all, we need to have a plan for each section that we want to execute on test day. So what do I mean by that? The idea is that when we're taking the exam on test day, we're only there to execute a plan that we've practiced over and over again with our practice questions and practice exams. An analogy I like to use is sports. When LeBron James is shooting a jump shot in the NBA Finals, is he thinking about his mechanics and how his feet look? No, that's all stuff he's prepared for ahead of time during the countless hours and shots he's taken in the gym. On the actual game day, he's just shooting. He's following his intuition. He's reacting to the defender in front of him. And similarly, the MCAT, I feel, is a performance. So on test day, we shouldn't be thinking about whether we know this or know that. We should really just be executing the plan and trusting the practice we've put in. So to do that, I found that having a checklist of things we want to accomplish for each section can be a good way of maintaining focus on the task at hand, the problem at hand, the passage at hand. So now what I want to do is sort of go through the strategies I use for Chem Phys and the checklist I use as sort of my structure. And the reason I share this with you is not so that you necessarily use the exact same thing. It's more so that you can have this structure to create your own strategy for your test. First, I'm going to read the passage in 4 to 5 minutes. After I finish completing the entire passage, I'm going to mentally summarize in a few sentences what the main message was and the main takeaways they want me to know. When I read the question, I'm going to highlight keywords such as not or anything that refers back to the passage. As I read each answer choice, if something is obviously incorrect, I'm going to cross it out and use process of elimination. Once I pick an answer choice, I'm moving on, no matter what, unless I'm absolutely certain I clicked the wrong answer or I made a mistake. If I spend more than 12 minutes on one passage and I notice it, I'm going to move on to the next passage and just sort of guess for the questions I haven't answered. And lastly, for every 30 minutes, I'm going to try to answer 20 questions specifically for the first sort of part of each section. Now, I know that's a lot of things to focus on. That's a lot of things to think about, but I practice it over a long period of time. So on test day, it felt really natural. Also, what this plan allowed me to do was not focus on anything else. Quite literally, when I was reading each passage, this was my only focus, was going through each of these points on the checklist. And what does that do? It occupies our mind with something productive. So if we start to feel nervous or worry about what our score is going to be or worry about what the results are going to be, we can go back to our plan and sort of pick it up as it comes. That plan really, really helped me. And until I implemented that, I didn't see a jump in my practice test scores. And I think it was what allowed me to stay calm, cool, and collected on test day. And I think I already mentioned this, but one thing is to make sure you use your own plan. Don't do exactly what I did because it's probably not going to work for you. You have to customize it to the things that you struggle with. So for example, I had a huge problem with going back and switching answers or making sure I clicked the right one. And I was wasting way too much time doing that. But if that's something you don't struggle with, maybe that shouldn't be a part of your plan. But let's say you're like 1 week out from your test and you're watching this. What can you do? One thing I did, and I know this might seem super abstract or weird, was I did visualization techniques. And specifically, I did it the night before practice exams and then the night before my real exam. Here are some examples. I would visualize myself starting the test and feeling extremely nervous, but mentally in the exercise, I would overcome it. I would visualize myself coming across a really boring cars passage that I wasn't interested in, but in my mental exercise, I would figure out how to get interested and overcome it and do well. I would visualize myself coming across a passage I basically had no idea what was going on, and I would overcome it and I would figure it out. And then lastly, I would visualize myself leaving the test center feeling proud of what I accomplished and the work I'd put in. I know this may not seem helpful, but I'm telling you, what it did is it prepared me for things that I knew would happen. No matter how much preparation I did, I knew I was going to feel nervous. I knew I was going to come across a passage I didn't really understand. I knew cars was going to be difficult for me. So on test day, since I'd visualized this in my head, when it happened, I wasn't as surprised or shocked. And that's really the key, is to expect things to happen. They're going to happen either way, right? We're going to feel anxious whether we prepare for it or not. So we might as well expect it going into the test. And to culminate those points, what it did is it took a lot of the fear away. I wasn't as scared. I felt like going into the test, I kind of had thought of all the potential possibilities. So I didn't fear something happening. I was more like, if it happens, it happens, and I'll have to deal with it. And I think that is a huge difference in mindset that I had than other students if I had to pick a few things. And lastly, we can do all of this, but there's probably still going to be moments on the test where we feel overwhelmed. That happened to me, but what can we do about it? So what I would sort of do is take a step back, take my hand off the mouse, close my eyes, and breathe in and out for like 5 to 10 seconds and sort of mentally motivate myself, refocus on the plan that I was trying to execute, and that would restart. And I know that might seem like a waste of time or distracting, but it really helped me when I felt like I was spiraling and getting really nervous or thinking about the wrong things. And I think having those simple things ahead of time, knowing that when you're going to face some anxiety during the test, you have a practice in your head, is going to even limit your anxiety because you're not as fearful of the possibilities. So those are some of the strategies I use. And I kind of just want to close this with the fact that the MCAT is extremely challenging, both mentally, intellectually, physically. It's a 7-hour test. So I know these things aren't going to be the cure-all for the problems, but I do think focusing some time and effort on mentality and confidence is going to do wonders for how you feel about the test, how you sort of put it in its place. And I really do think for performance. The key takeaway from this is that the nervousness isn't going to go away. The challenge isn't going to go away. But what we can do is be more prepared to manage it and sort of expect it. And that's sort of why I think these strategies helped me, is because they sort of prepared me to expect the uncertain. Lastly, this can be really difficult to do on your own. So if you feel like you need help with this, TPC, Premed Consultants, has coaching, and in those services, they can provide you help with developing confidence. So if you feel like you want a professional or somebody else to sort of guide you along and help you figure out these strategies, you can learn all about that in the description. The other thing is we're just starting these YouTube videos out, so I would really appreciate any feedback you have, positive or negative, as well as any ideas that you would like me to discuss in relation to pre-med sort of topics, the MCAT, or anything else. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.